Tadabini. I'm a senior manager with our firm. This is just our disclaimer that we have to put out here. This is not meant to be taken as any financial, tax, accounting, or legal consulting advice. So moving on, as she mentioned, I am a part of Gelman, Rosenberg, and Freedman CPAs. We are now currently rebranded under the name GRF CPAs and Advisors. And just a little background about our firm. We've been around for just about 30 years. We are located in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just outside of the Washington, D.C. arena. We also have 2 satellite offices, one in New York City and one in Baltimore, Maryland. We are a part of a wide network of CPA firms, mostly dealing with CPA America. And our firm is comprised of 18 partners and 120 staff. So we are a good sized firm, but I think we're a little bit different than a lot of other CPA firms out there in that we have an audit practice that pretty much extends the majority of our business. So of our entire firm revenue, about 85% is still derived on strictly assurance services. So that kind of sets us apart, I think, a little bit unique of a different diversification of revenue streams for our firm in general. I just kind of wanted to talk about phase 1 for us, which was really the buy-in phase for our firm and getting the use of MindBridge. So talking about how did we get there? Number 1 was really just time related to research and dedication that was performed by a few of our team members. This really all started about actually with one of our seniors currently. I think he's actually watching it, so shout out to Matt. He was one who went to a conference, I believe, and either MindBridge was a vendor or was doing some kind of a presentation and brought it back to the firm for us. So it was very valuable to have other people outside of, within our firm that were able to listen, hear different technologies and softwares and be able to bring that back. So number 1, we had someone who was out there in the industry really listening in on this. So obviously AI is something that has been being discussed for the past several years, how it's going to be used in the audit, how it's going to change the audit landscape. So really we took it back to the IT and our technology team, right? So we have a dedicated group of people who really look at our information systems, what kind of technologies and softwares and tools we're utilizing within our firm. And so they were able to really dive in a little bit deeper. So as part of that process, obviously we reached out to MindBridge, started learning a little bit about what MindBridge actually does. And this was about 2 years ago, I believe, or maybe about 2.5 years ago at this point. So we started those discussions, and a part of that, obviously, we asked if there was a trial run. So a lot of vendors these days allow us as firms and organizations to be able to use the software without actually getting an investment as far as monetary dollars go. So we got that trial run going and we started researching it and using it on a few clients. We ran into a little snafus, I would say, from what I heard from the discussions, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. Some common frequently asked questions, I think, that were from our partner group. First and foremost, number 1, how will it help us become more efficient? I think that's something that we've always heard from the landscape of the industry, is that AI is going to make us more efficient. We're going to be able to do all kinds of new and fun things with it and be able to spend less time and ultimately pass that lack of cost and resources on to our client. Well, one of the things that, as I've gone through this process and as I've talked to a number of different people who are using MindBridge within their industry and in their organizations, is that from my perspective, it doesn't really help us to make us more efficient, needless to say, from an audit perspective. What I really think it is getting us down to is really aligning us with our risk assessment strategy, right? So as auditors, we're all about risk assessment. But generally, our assessment has been on financial statement line items and significant audit areas, right? So when we utilize MindBridge, now what we are able to do is take that risk assessment strategy and actually apply it to individual transactions. So I think as we work forward and we move forward with our use of MindBridge specifically in our firm, we're really going to be able to look at inherent risk a little bit more deeply on a transactional level within that general ledger. So I was in a presentation that JC did from MindBridge. I believe it was back in December or maybe November through our Maryland Association of CPAs at an AI Innovation Summit. And one of the presentations that he gave really struck me with a chord. So some of the other softwares out there, or even just using Excel, right? When we talk about IDEA, Caseware IDEA, if you know what that software is, or again, using Excel, we used to be able to apply a lot of different statistical sampling or analysis with the use of those types of tools. So I'm talking about taking a general ledger, making sure that it's complete from a debit to credit standpoint, and then being able to take those statistical analyses and run them on that general ledger, but we're running things one at a time. So we're taking rounded dollars, or we are taking journal entries that were posted on a weekend date, and we're taking and extracting those individual items, but we come up with a sample set of, let's say, hundreds, maybe sometimes even thousands. Whereas MindBridge starts to apply analysis atop analysis on top of analysis, algorithm on top of algorithm, right? So instead of taking the hundreds to even thousands of sample transactions, we're now able to hone in to say maybe 10 transactions that are really considered to be high risk because they're taking multiple data points and control points within their system and applying it. So I think that's one aspect from my perspective that, again, we're not being more efficient, we're just aligning our strategy and our assessments. The second one is, what value is it going to add to our clients? Well, we've been able to utilize this, I think, pretty well over the past year at this point, and have been able to take it into our clients as far as a results presentation goes, and they love it. So some of the things that we're able to do is just talk about who is posting most of the journal entries, so we can look at things like segregation of duties, or maybe even improving some of those control processes with who is posting some of those entries. We can look at different spikes from a monthly standpoint. So you saw on Baldwin's presentation last, one of the graphs that they have that's disaggregated by month. So we are able to see, are you doing your closing entries on a monthly consistent basis, or is there a huge spike on an annual basis? Let's talk about that a little bit more. So there are definitely things from our perspective that we are able to give value to that client. I think as we dive more and more into MindBridge and how to use it more effectively and efficiently within our audit process, we'll be able to give more and more results to our clients as far as operations go. And then obviously the last common frequently asked question, how much does it cost? Well, obviously I can't discuss that here, but that's something definitely to work with MindBridge on. But again, it's something that's going to come up, so be prepared to answer it as you go through the process. So our second phase here really deals with implementation. So I just wanted to bring a couple of best practices for you. So you heard our previous speakers talk about training. Absolutely agree with them 100% that training is a must. I'll give you a brief story. I came into the firm last April. And I came in as a senior manager, so I was able to be given the time, because I had time in my schedule. I didn't have the client load yet that I currently have, or that some of our other managers have, to be able to dive into MindBridge, understand it, learn a little bit more about it. But I didn't really have the knowledge. And it wasn't until that we had a training that MindBridge actually put on us. It was a day-and-a-half training, locked and loaded. We went over lots of different strategies as related to data manipulation and formatting to get it into MindBridge efficiently, what we can do from a firm to utilize the resources and the tools that we currently have, and how to integrate that with MindBridge. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So it wasn't until that time frame that I feel like I was really able to truly understand the capabilities of MindBridge. So training is a must. There's lots of great tools and knowledge up there from the representatives that we work with on a weekly basis over at MindBridge. The second thing that I have here is to identify a change leader and a change group. So again, as I mentioned, we're a medium-sized firm. We have about 120 staff. So really having that one person to lead that change and that charge for having MindBridge is essential. I think one of the kind of obstacles that we ran into prior to me coming on board with the firm is that we had not someone that could really dedicate and devote a lot of time into the software and the methodology that we were going to adopt as a firm. And so when I was given that time, we took it, we ran with it. I identified a change group, a select small number of people within our assurance staff to help me through the process. So they are people who are leading the change with me. They are the ones who are go-tos for questions on the different analyses, how to get the data into MindBridge, any kind of questions that we have. that group of people is really our first resource for our firm and for our assurance practice. The third bullet point here is really to allow the change leader the time to implement. So as I mentioned, I was able to give that time because I was fairly new to the firm. So if you've identified somebody who is not new to the firm, has been there for a while and has a heavy client load, I'd encourage you to take some of that load off of them because they are going to need the time to really work through the process. And then the fourth bullet point here is the custom MindBridge grouping. So we utilize Caseware as our software for our working papers for our audit processes. And within Caseware, we can take our trial balance, and obviously we have our mappings or our groupings if you are a FX engagement CCH user. So from that, we were able to actually take our mappings and be able to build out a custom grouping within MindBridge so that our import process went from literally hours with mapping for new engagements to minutes. It was incredible. And I want to give a huge shout out to the team. Adam Young, thank you so much for working with that for us because it's been a huge time saver. So that's definitely something on the forefront to have your change leader work on. So with that, we'll move on to phase 3, and that's development of your strategy. I just wanted to kind of briefly discuss a few things that we as a firm considered as a part of our methodology and our strategy. So if you are in the implementation stage, if you are a seasoned user within MindBridge, we know that there are default weights for the control points. So one of the things that we really grappled with is, well, do we change those weights? Are there certain statistical analyses or machine learning items that we really want MindBridge to be more weighted towards versus what they currently have as some default weightings? So ultimately, we decided that as of currently, we are not going to change any of those default settings. The second item is materiality thresholds. Inside of MindBridge, you can place a number in there. So we work with a lot of nonprofits and smaller nonprofits too. Our bread and butter is pretty much in the $5 to $10 million range for revenue. So from our perspective, we really wanted MindBridge to not even have a materiality set. So our materiality is set at that default $0 value currently. And the reason for that is because from a transactional standpoint, we really don't feel that there's necessarily materiality that you can set to a potential fraud risk, right? So we're really utilizing this right now for our fraud risks and hoping to more align that with a better, broader scope for our risk assessment. So currently, we have chosen not to set any type of materiality threshold. And then number 3, what are we going to require our teams to test? So if you are in that stage, again, MindBridge sets out a high, medium, and a low risk standpoint for all of the transactions within the general ledger. So are we going to require our teams to test 100% of all high risk transactions? How much are they required to test for medium risk transactions? Do we do anything with our low risk transactions? So those, again, are just some questions maybe to consider and think about as you go through your strategy process. And the last bullet point that I really have here has to do with your standardization of your work papers. So again, it's really important for your team to understand what your firm's strategy and methodology is with the use of MindBridge. So we've developed a template that is multiple tabs. I think it's probably 7 or 8 tabs for our MindBridge utilization and what we've done from an implementation standpoint. It creates uniformity within our work paper. So when we come in for peer review, everyone's able to answer the questions that might be had from peer review in the same manner. We've got all that documentation laid out. We've got a work paper template that is easily fillable and easily followed as well because it's been scrubbed clean by not only our internal team, but also MindBridge took a look at it just to make sure that it's what they've seen across the board from an industry as well. So those are just a couple of things that we've considered through the process. There are obviously a lot of little nitty-gritty pinpoints that you might be able to get into as well. So, you know, do we test for journal entries? Are we going to select and use it for any other types of additional samplings for our audit areas, even if they're not populated in the low, high, or medium risk? These are all questions that we still have as we are ongoing. So, you know, one of those earlier poll questions is if you're a seasoned user or in implementation stage. I'd set us somewhere in the middle, honestly, because there's a lot that MindBridge can do that we just haven't started utilizing it yet for. So I know that we've got a lot of work to do in the future. And, you know, as they mentioned previously from Baldwin, We don't want to swim too long in that kiddie pool. We want to dive into the deep end. So phase 4 is obviously a big question. Now we've got it in the firm. We've got our audit staff using it. What value is it going to bring to the table? So I think one of the big things here is proposals that we've submitted for RFPs. From our perspective, we're one of the very few firms in this area, in the competition arena with not-for-profits, that actually makes use of an AI. So it really sets us apart when I'm able to get in there in a proposal for an oral presentation and talk about it, or one of my other change team members. We are able to really spark some good conversations. I actually went into a proposal back in January or February, and I hate to say this, it's a great thing though, probably about 20 to 25 minutes of it was just talking about AI and what MindBridge is and what it can do. They were really interested in it. A lot of, talk about how it can help them with their operations. So, that's one other key piece. The other thing here that we have is just the AI results-driven presentations. When we can bring to the table to the audit committee, not only our audit results, but also specifically what we've done and what we've looked at from a transactional standpoint for the organization, and report back what we've seen and what we've encountered, and perhaps some things that they can do from an efficiency standpoint, things that they can do to strengthen their internal controls, that adds value to our client. And that's obviously, we are in the practice of not just being an auditor, but we are in the practice of being an advisor to our clients. So that is our value. The third thing here is forward thinking and greater use in the future. So as we think about what AI is going to do, there's been a lot of talk about continuous auditing, being able to plug into the system. Obviously, as auditors, we are still, really grappled with how does that impair potentially our independence? How can we utilize it? But again, we can start to get some general ledger information. We can always have that read-only access and extract information from things like Intact or QuickBooks Online or whatever system, and start to pull down things maybe on a quarterly basis or a semi-annual basis, so that we're able to look at things in real time. And that helps us to identify things potentially from the client standpoint that might trip them up perhaps at final audit standpoint, right? So the more that we can help our clients throughout the year with transactions, the better advising that we give to them and the better value that we can also give to them. Some of the other things that we're thinking about for forward thinking is that our outsourced accounting and advisory service team, because we have another line there that does outsourced accounting, they're actually thinking about potentially using this as well. So it's also just one more item or area that they can use for their clients to help drive those efficiencies as well. Because they're not in there doing necessarily the day-to-day bookkeeping. So if they can identify some of those high-risk transactions to help with their audit process or with their audit preparation process or their monthly financial statement preparation process, then that's also additional value that they can add and perceive as well. Some of the other things, obviously, you've seen some of the graphs that MindBridge can provide and kind of spits out as a part of its analysis and process through the risk assessment that it does. I think, when we look and we develop our presentation template, MindBridge has a new one that they just put out a couple of months ago that's available. So we originally had a PowerPoint presentation. Now we've kind of taken their template, rebranded it, and kind of done it our own way and added some additional words. But it's got a lot of really great information there about what MindBridge does. So again, that's just another perceived value from my perspective that our clients, I think, are really interested in AI and how it's going to shape up for the audit world.
Thank you so much, Tricia. That was absolutely fantastic information.